since the 1950s, male births have declined by nearly 2% compared to females. And so that has a lot to do with this sex ratio shift. In 1950, there was 99.6 males for every 100 females. In 2020, there's 97.9 males for every 100 females.
Mm-hmm.
And so the life expectancy at birth is also an issue, because females have a 7% higher life expectancy at birth than males. And so the life expectancy for a female at birth is 93%, but for males, it's 86%. And so that distance, that difference, 7%, if it keeps on moving further apart, then we have an issue.
Welcome to Old Guy Talks to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. Ladies, if you want to know what your guy is thinking, this podcast is for women too. Each week, a special guest helps you create that life you've imagined. We talk anti-aging medicine, personal growth, relationships and hot sex. Yeah, you hear me, getting laid more frequently, other guy vices, and topics that many don't want to talk about but need to. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you have to be old. Don't want to miss anything? Be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to go to www.thestandard.academy/magazine and grab a free copy of our new digital magazine, The Standard Academy, where we talk about erogenous zones, growing hair back, and other things that will help you create that kick-ass life. Now get ready to listen up and share with friends.
This is Oris, the official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys and helping guys, not just older guys, but guys, well, create a kick-ass life for themselves and those that they love. And part of that has to do, well, with hormone optimization. And I'm sure I've not made a secret of it. I've been on testosterone optimization for over 25 years. My primary care doctor said all sorts of things were going to happen that didn't. My dick did not fall off. I did not get heart disease and all sorts of other stuff. But today I have with me a guest, Scott Howell, Ph.D., and he's been on the podcast a few times before, and we've had some interesting conversations. If you want to check out some of the previous episodes, we'll talk about trans athletes, and he actually helped write the position paper for the USA Powerlifting Association on the topic. And let me tell you a little bit more about Scott, because he's a really smart dude. There's initials here in his bio that I don't know what they mean. CSC, Scott Howell, PhD, that's what I do. CSCS, ABHRT-C. And he's also the Clinical Research and Education Director of Optimize U, which we're going to talk about also, and Professor of Health Science at Optimize U Health Sciences and the Colorado State University. Dr. Scott Howell holds a PhD in Health Science from Trident University, a Master's of Science in Sports and Health and Science from American Military University, a Bachelor's of Science in Sports and Health Science from I'm just reading that again, and mechanical engineering degree from Forsyth Technical College, as well as 2 additional doctorates. He's certified strength and conditioning specialist, periodization strength and conditioning expert, and exercise scientist. And his primary areas of expertise include using androgen metabolism, hormone sensitivity, pharmacogenetics, harm reduction among performance-enhancing drug uses, exercise physiology, adaptation to exercise, and sports training. He also serves as a consultant for various sports organizations, medical societies regarding the harm of doping in sports and pharmacogenic risk of performance-enhancing drugs. Now, those are some really big words.
Well, they can be simplified. It's all about
we're going to do that. We're going to do that. We're definitely going to do that. So Scott, thank you for coming on the program, and always enjoyed having you on. And you're obviously a wealth of knowledge. Scott, just so everyone knows in the audience, Scott actually reads the studies, not just the summaries. He looks at the tables. He doesn't do what the old guy does, which he goes to the summary at the end. But he actually reads them with a very, very critical eye to discern the scientific method that's used and the whether the data actually supports the conclusions in the articles. And so he gets into the weeds. He gets into the weeds of stuff. So Scott, today I want to talk about something that is going on in society, and there's certainly an attack on masculinity. There's no doubt about it. And part of what's happening also, though, is that the question comes up, and there's actually a lot of women are asking this question or making this comment, is that men seem to be less masculine than they used to be. And there's a lot of data that points in that direction. That's not just a false perception. That's actually a true thing. So let's delve into it in terms of, let's talk about first thing. I mean, the obvious question is testosterone levels. What's going on with men's testosterone levels?
Well, the interesting thing about all this is that there's Swan and Levine, that group.
Right.
They've established a lot of good data. They actually published a study 2 days ago we can talk about, because it updated the 2017 study, and there was even greater increases in male infertility at that point, but that's not testosterone.
So I'm going to stop for a second, because Levine is a professor at Hebrew University, and Dr. Swain, she's an epidemiologist at NYU. And the study that you're talking about was published, I believe, in the Annals of Endocrinology, which is a highly peer-reviewed journal. So we're not talking about tinfoil stuff yet.
That's the first meta-analysis that was done on male infertility was Carlson, and that was in 1992. Well, the Swan Group replicated that study in 2000, confirmed those findings, and then in 2017, the Levine study looked at the dates from 1973 to 2011. And I'll have to pull the numbers up here, but give me 1 second here. I've got some notes because the statistics are, let me see, where's it at? Okay, in the first meta-analysis from Levine in 2017, what they found was that from 1973 to 2001, there was a significant unadjusted decline in the average sperm count at 1.4% per year. And over that period from 1973 to 2011, that equated to a 52.4% drop in sperm count. Now, they also found a significant adjusted decline when they adjusted for the covariates statistically to see what those effects were. There was an adjusted decline in average total sperm count of 1.6% per year. And that equated to 59.3% of an overall decline from 1973 to 2011. Now, the new study that was just came out, pull this up here, and it should be on 13. Yes. They found in this study, when they looked from 1973 to 2018, that the average sperm count per milliliter declined by 1.2% per milliliter per year from the 1940s to 1973. And then from 1973 to 1986, it was 1.3% drop per milliliter. Mm-hmm. And then by 1996, that had the decline 0.6% per milliliter. And so to give everyone some sort of conceptualization of this, the average sperm count per milliliter of semen in 1973 was 101 million per milliliter. In 2008 or 18, it dropped to 49 million per milliliter on average. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, it dropped more than 50%. And this rate, when I looked at the increase, like if you have a 1% per year over a decade, that's 10% over a decade, right?
Right.
Well, in 5 years, or in 40 years, it increased over 50%.
Right.
And so we're way past that 1% rate when we look at actual empirical data. Now that is this results in a 51.6% decline in average sperm count, resulting in a 52 million count drop in sperm in less than 40 years.
Right.
And so that is substantial. Anytime it's a population level issue and the sex ratio is changing, then we have issues because we're at below the replacement level now to maintain the population composition. And so
is that in the United States or is that worldwide?
No, that's in the US. We're at replacement levels, and actually since the 1950s, male births have declined by nearly 2% compared to females. And so that has a lot to do with this sex ratio shift. In 1950, there was 99.6 males for every 100 females. In 2020, there's 97.9 males for every 100 females. And so the life expectancy at birth is also an issue because females have a 7% higher life expectancy at birth than males. And so the life expectancy for a female at birth is 93%, but for males, it's 86%. And so that distance, that difference, 7%, if it keeps on moving further apart, then we have an issue. Now, Schwann had actually mentioned a very interesting point about that, because the problem is that pregnant females that are pregnant with a male, if they're exposed to endocrine disruptors, then they're being changed, right?
Right.
They're
Let's talk about a little bit about, I want to step back here because you brought up the term endocrine disruptors. A lot of people are not familiar with those. What are endocrine disruptors?
The Endocrine Society defines an endocrine disruptor as any chemical or substance that can affect any endocrine action in the body. They specifically define it in regards to humans, but it applies to all animals. And so the biggest endocrine disruptors are an evil of society today that came from the Industrial Revolution. As we increased our manufacturing, these chemists there was no control over these chemists on what they made, nor was all of them tested before they were put in products. And that's why you see bisphenol A being knocked out in different states and risk labels put on different things. But endocrine disruptors, there's a whole plethora, but the biggest ones that affect testosterone levels are phthalates, the plasticizers. Bisphenol A also affects testosterone levels. Although bisphenol A acts estrogenic in the body, it can also competitively inhibit the androgen receptor, a natural ligand from binding. And so the issue with any type of pesticide, any type of chemical that has been identified, there's chlorates, organochlorates, there's PFAS, there's just a ton of different ones. But regardless, most of the ones that affect testosterone levels are the industrial solvents and the plasticizers. These are things, even in consumer products, that we're exposed to on a daily basis. So when we touch plastic, when we heat things up in plastic, when we use certain coatings in different pans, canned food that has coatings in it, a lot of these are not regulated. And in Europe, they are. And so I know there was one study where, I think it was in 2015, they did independent water samples around the country in the US. And what they found was that the exposure of about 20 EDCs that were detected in the water supply were about 1,000 times higher than the regulatory limits that were set in Europe.
Do you need accountability? Are you looking to change the course of your life but have failed to keep on track? Too often we take in information and fail to act. Do you need an accountability program to stay the course? Then go to www.thestandard.academy and find out about my accountability program that goes with my course that helps you find out what you want, why you want it, and how to get it. The accountability program keeps you on track to get results.
Oh,
And
well,
so
that's
there's a lot of lobbying
pretty
going
amazing.
on to keep these products in the manufacturing industry, even though there have been scientists from all over the world that have testified in front of Congress about this problem. And so it's sort of disconcerting that the best scientists in the world say, hey, we've tracked these rates of autism, we've tracked increasing rates of type 2 diabetes, increasing rates of hypothyroidism in younger women, women reaching puberty quicker, males not reaching puberty as fast and needing help. I mean, these are all issues that have been directly voiced to the Congress, but nothing has been done about it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this testosterone situation. What and what is causing? Not, I guess not what is causing, because we talked about the endocrine disruption complex, but what is the I guess the pathophysiology? I don't want to use such a big word, but basically, how does this lower decrease in testosterone manifest itself?
Well, it's sort of a trifecta of things. The 1% decline that's been identified applies to a decrease in testosterone levels, increase in rates of testicular cancer, decrease in rates of male factor, or increase in rates of male factor infertility, and also decreased sperm quality and count.
Right.
And so it's really 4 or 5 factors that are also risk factors for one another. And so it gets really complicated when we look at mechanisms, but basically, if there's a primary effect, if for example, if a young man has castration level testosterone levels, and he's been exposed to an EDC, then we have to look at, okay, are there any other factors genetically? Was the mother exposed in the womb? Is there any type of cryptocortism? Is there any type of other health effects that we know that are linked to endocrine disruptors that could influence the testosterone levels? But basically, these transgenerational changes from one generation to another are really what transmit the changes in DNA, the epigenetic changes that occur over these exposures over a long time. But as far as what actually causes it, obviously, if there's sufficient androgen levels in the body, the feedback mechanisms to the pituitary, they still function. But when endocrine disruptors are included in the mix of endogenous hormones that are natural in the body, this exogenous mixture of endocrine disruptors, even with tiny concentrations, if there's multiple EDCs, it lowers the exposure threshold for adverse effects. And so what that means is that some of these endocrine disruptors act as agonists of the receptors. They can actually activate the receptor, and that includes another complete conversation. They can also act as antagonists of the receptor to block the natural ligand from bonding. They can also be competitive inhibitors, where they bind to one part of the receptor, but the natural ligand can't completely bond.
Yeah. Now, Scott, you brought up the word womb, and I want to circle back to that, because one of my understandings, and obviously you'll tell me if it's correct, is that if women who are pregnant are exposed to endocrine disrupting compounds, that affects the in utero development of the testicles, and it causes all sorts of problems downstream. Is that correct?
That's it. But also it affects brain development, and there, even in each part of the gestational phases, at critical times, and Schwann calls these times of susceptibility. At any of these times, when the female is exposed and she's pregnant with a male, definitely that fetus it's not going to develop in the normal way that it would. And so really a big deal. Just right before we got on this podcast, I looked at something from the Endocrine Society where they just looked at, and I'll pull it up here. This study looked at NHANES data in the United States, and what they found was that phthalate exposure among boys 6 to 12 increased metabolites of one phthalate was linked to a 24 to 34.1% drop in testosterone levels in boys 6 to 12.
Yeah, which is absolutely incredible. Now, before we started recording, we were talking about a friend of mine whose son is 25 years old, and he went and we've suspected that had low testosterone for quite a while, and he finally got that tested, and he came with an incredibly low value, and being told by that he was in the normal range, and it was like, no way. And I've heard this from other physicians who treat young men with testosterone, that they're saying that they're seeing in their practices, they're seeing men in their 20s and 30s showing up with lower baseline values than men in their 50s and 60s.
I believe it because I saw it myself for years. I mean, and I see it even today. When I look at lab work today, I've had a ton of young men that have taken SARMs as supplements because these are readily available, and they're marketed as
SARMs are
a selective androgen receptor modulator, and
okay.
None of these have been are completely approved by the FDA, although they've been tested in several trials. Now, obviously, since these haven't been approved, supplement companies have been selling these, but now the FDA is starting to crack down on that. But my point is that there was one fellow that I did a consultation with. He had only used, I think, Ligandrol, which is a SARM, for, I think, about 6 months. And 2 years later, he's seeing me because his testosterone levels have never come back. And when we tested him out, he was under 200. And you could tell that he was just frustrated. He was in college and he wanted to get over that. But now there's an issue with case reports popping up with SARM-induced hypogonadism.
You're right. But also, I mean, that's one area. But there's also lots that where young men don't have they have not taken SARMs and have low testosterone just as a result of
Well, it's a whole plethora of things. It's even
so
go ahead.
No, so I think that this whole thing it's a bigger crisis, and I think in a lot of ways we're not addressing it in a way to really deal with this problem, because and let's, I kind of want to talk about this whole because I know you have it on your website that normal is not healthy, and that's on your website, and by the way, we're going to have contact information and website all be in the program notes, so you don't have to worry about running down. But I hear this because I talk to men about testosterone all the time, and they say, "Oh, my doctor tells me I'm in the normal range." Like, well, that doesn't mean healthy. If you're in the normal range for BMI in the United States, you're not healthy.
No. Well, one time I actually traced back to where the paradigm shifted in medicine about what is optimal, what is normal, and I traced it back to a paper in 1978, the year of my birth, and it was a physician that was actually more like an op-ed, stating that why are we treating to normal values when we should be treating to optimal values? And so there was even at that time, there was clinicians thinking about optimal compared to normal, because normal doesn't equate to health. It doesn't. And so even with endocrine disruptors, that throws this big wrench into treatment, because each person, each man, and even each woman has to be tailored. They have
Right.
their dose is not going to be the same as anybody else's dose. And it's largely dependent on their previous exposure to EDCs. How many of these do we have to compete with? Do we have to titrate a dose to get past these effects? Do we have to do that? Well, in my opinion, yes, sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't. But there are a plethora of younger men that are presenting for the first time for erectile dysfunction treatment, less than 40 years old. And historically, if you're less than 40 years old, if you go to a urologist, they're going to give you a psychogenic questionnaire to talk about depression, performance anxiety, and stuff like that. They're going to ignore any organic factors that are there just because of the age. But now there was a study by Bergstrom that actually, I think it was about 1,600 men, and they studied couples. There were couples trying to conceive, but it was the male factor infertility, and that's what it is when a fertile female cannot be impregnated by the male because of sperm quality or whatever of the male. That's called male factor infertility. And what they found was that the whole entire sample had declines in morphology, and some of it, rapid motility, was up to 5.5% decline per year, changes in morphology, and a decrease in sperm count, I believe, of 1.6% per year.
Right.
And so these things are substantial. These are things that we can't just ignore and say they're going to go away. And obviously, if we could stop the exposure for several generations, there could be a way to get out of this. But the way that the world is so polluted right now, and these chemicals are everywhere, even in the water supply, I don't have the optimistic attitude that other researchers have. To me, there is no way to escape exposure to EDCs. We can mitigate it as best we can, but there's no way to escape it.
Yeah. Well, Levine and Swan had looked at their data, and the pace of decline in sperm counts, and I believe that somewhere in 2050 or 2055, they said that the majority of males in the world will be infertile.
I agree, but based on the projections with their data, and even the lowest projections, they're going to be infertile.
Thank you for joining Dr. Orist and his incredible guest. Like what you heard and learned? Then be sure to do 3 things. 1, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. 2, share this with someone who may need to hear it. 3, leave a review and rate this podcast. Opt in at www.thestandard.academy/magazine and get our free digital magazine with savings, articles, and deeper dives into cool controversy. Be the guy who takes action. Without action, you're not going to get the results you want. Thank you again, and make it a great day.